Let's cut through a century of financial noise and inflation to land on a number, so starting it feels like a typo. In 1905, the official price of a single ounce of gold in the United States was $20.67. For the price of a mediocre takeout meal today, you could have purchased one of the most legendary, sought-after, and indestructible assets in human history. Let that sink in. Imagine walking into a bank, sliding a $20 gold coin, a double eagle, across the counter, and receiving a $20 bill and some change. The coin was the gold, and the paper was a receipt for it. This wasn't just a price tag. It was the bedrock of the entire global financial system, a fixed star in an economic universe that operated on rules alien to our modern reality of floating currencies and digital speculation. That $20.67 figure is a ghost, haunting our current era of trillion-dollar debts and monetary experimentation, whispering a question we've largely forgotten how to ask. What if money itself had a definition, an unchanging anchor? This journey to 1905 isn't mere historical trivia. It's a voyage to the lost continent of financial certainty, a place where the phrase, "as good as gold," was not a metaphor but a legal fact. To understand the profound meaning behind that $20.67, we must first step onto the solid ground of the classical gold standard. In 1905, the United States, along with most major powers, operated under this system. The U.S. dollar was not a free-floating fiat currency, but was legally defined as a specific weight of gold, 23.22 grains of pure gold, which equated to $20.67 per troy ounce. This meant any individual or foreign government could present paper currency at a bank or the Treasury and demand its face value in physical gold. Money was, quite literally, a warehouse receipt for a tangible commodity. This created an automatic, self-correcting mechanism for international trade and domestic money supply. If a country imported too much, gold would flow out to pay for those goods, reducing its money supply, causing domestic prices to fall, and making its exports cheaper and imports more expensive, eventually reversing the flow. It was a system of breathtaking, almost brutal discipline, enforced not by central bankers, but by the impersonal logic of physics and arithmetic. The price was fixed, immovable, a covenant between the citizen and the state. The year 1905 itself was a moment of zenith for this system. The United States, fresh from its imperial ventures and riding a wave of industrial might, was a confident participant in a globalized, gold-backed world. The Gilded Age was transitioning into the progressive era. Titans like Rockefeller, Carnegie, and Morgan shaped an economy of staggering growth and inequality. Yet, through this tumult, the gold dollar remained a constant. A farmer in Iowa, a steel worker in Pittsburgh, and a banker on Wall Street all transacted in currency that promised the same unwavering amount of gold. This universality facilitated an unprecedented expansion of trade and capital flows. London was the center of global finance, and the pound sterling's value was also fixed to gold, creating a stable exchange rate environment. In this world, a bond issued in New York to fund a railroad in Argentina could be priced with certainty, as the currency risk was negligible. The $20.67 anchor provided a foundation upon which the vast, intricate edifice of early 20th century capitalism was built, fostering both immense prosperity and fragility that few recognized at the time. But what could you actually buy with that $20.67 gold ounce, or its equivalent in paper? Context is everything. The average annual wage for a non-farm worker was roughly $500 to $600. A new Ford Model B car cost about $2,000. A luxurious, tailor-made men's suit could be had for $20. A pound of steak was around 15 cents. A dozen eggs, 20 cents. A skilled tradesman might earn $2.50 for a 10-hour day. Therefore, that ounce of gold represented about a week and a half's wages for the average American. It was a substantial sum, but not an unimaginable one. Crucially, because the currency was gold, inflation was virtually non-existent over the long term. The Consumer Price Index in 1913 was nearly the same as in 1800. Prices fluctuated with harvest and business cycles, but there was no persistent annual erosion of purchasing power engineered by monetary policy. Saving money in a bank account or under a mattress meant its value in gold, and thus a command over real goods, remained largely intact for decades. This fostered a culture of long-term saving and capital accumulation, fundamentally different from our incentive to seek yield to outpace inflation. Physically, gold circulated not just as bars and vaults, but in the pockets of citizens. The $20 double eagle gold coin, containing nearly a full troy ounce of gold, was a common sight for large transactions. There were also $10 eagles, $5 half eagles, and smaller denominations. These coins were not collectors' items. They were money. Their value came from their metallic content, guaranteed by the government stamp. This created a direct, tactile relationship with wealth that is absent today. Hefting a double eagle was to feel the density of value. The system's integrity depended on this trust. The coin's stamp value and its metallic value were the same. Furthermore, silver still played a role in bimetallism's shadow, with the 1900 Gold Standard Act having firmly established gold as the sole standard, but silver dollars and certificates circulated for smaller, everyday commerce. The monetary landscape was a hybrid of metal and paper, but all paper was ultimately a legitimate claim on that foundational, fixed-price metal at the core. The stability of the $20.67 price, however, was maintained by a sophisticated, often opaque, financial architecture. The U.S. Treasury and a network of major private banks, with J.P. Morgan as a de facto central banker, managed gold flows. They used interest rates by influencing call money rates to attract or repel gold. If gold reserves dwindled, rates would rise, attracting foreign capital seeking yield, which would arrive in the form of gold. The system required immense pools of liquidity and deep trust in London and New York clearinghouses. It also had a dark side. The discipline was deflationary and could be punishing during economic panics, like the bankers' panic of 1907. Still 2 years in the future, the rigid gold supply could not be easily expanded to provide liquidity, leading to brutal credit crunches and waves of bankruptcies. The very stability that encouraged long-term investment also amplified short-term crises, as the money supply could not be manipulated to bail out the system. The price was sacred, but its maintenance could demand severe human and economic sacrifice. Internationally, the $20.67 was a key peg in a vast network. The British pound was fixed at 4.247 pounds per troy ounce, setting a dollar-pound exchange rate of about $4.86 to 1 pound. This rate barely wavered for decades. A French franc, German mark, and other major currencies all had their own fixed gold prices. This created what economists call automatically balanced trade. Say the U.S. had a trade deficit with Britain. Gold would ship from New York to London. This would shrink the U.S. money supply, lowering prices and wages here, while expanding Britain's, raising prices and wages there. Soon, American goods became cheaper for Britons and British goods more expensive for Americans, correcting the imbalance. It was a self-righting ship, but the process, deflation and unemployment in the deficit country, was politically and socially painful. The system privileged international financial stability over domestic full employment, a trade-off that would eventually become untenable in the face of democratic pressures and total war. The mining industry in 1905 was directly governed by this fixed price. With gold's value constant, profitability was solely a function of extraction cost. This spurred massive technological innovation in mining and refining, particularly in South Africa, which was surpassing the U.S. in production and the Klondike. New cyanidation processes allowed for the profitable mining of lower-grade ores. The fixed price did not stimulate production in the way a rising price would today. Instead, it created a relentless drive for efficiency. Miners were not speculators on the metal's price. They were industrial producers of a monetary commodity with a guaranteed government buyer at $20.67. The discovery of a major new field, like the Alaskan gold rush and ongoing, would not depress the global gold price. It would increase the world's monetary base, leading to gentle global inflation, spreading the new wealth across all gold standard nations. The system democratized the inflationary impact of discoveries while socializing the cost of production. What did this mean for the ordinary citizen's financial psychology? Debt and credit carried different risks. A long-term mortgage, for instance, was to be repaid in dollars each, defined by the same gold weight. There was no hope of inflating away the debt. This made lenders cautious and borrowing terms strict. Conversely, it rewarded the saver phenomenally. A penny saved was, indeed, a penny earned, and it would hold its value. This entrenched a conservative, patient financial culture. Speculation existed, of course. The stock market was active, but it was speculation on enterprise, not on currency devaluation. The dollar itself was not a variable in the equation. This absolute monetary certainty is perhaps the most difficult aspect of the 1905 financial mind for us to comprehend. Living as we do in a world where central banks explicitly aim to erode the value of currency over time to stimulate spending. The political landscape around gold in 1905 was relatively quiet, a calm between storms. The fiery populist crusade for free silver, led by William Jennings Bryan, which aimed to monetize silver to inflate the currency and aid indebted farmers, had been decisively defeated in the 1896 and 1900 elections. The 1900 Gold Standard Act had cemented gold supremacy. President Theodore Roosevelt, though a progressive trustbuster, was a firm adherent to sound money. The debate had shifted from whether to have a gold standard to how to manage its sometimes harsh mechanics. The focus was on banking reform to prevent the panics that the rigid standard could exacerbate, a conversation that would lead to the creation of the Federal Reserve System in 1913. But in 1905, the system was at its peak of credibility, a universally accepted truth of economic life. Yet, invisible cracks were already forming. The very concentration of wealth and industrial power that the era produced began to strain the social fabric. The gold standard's requirement for wage and price flexibility during downturns clashed with the growing power of labor unions and large corporations, which resisted wage cuts and price reductions. The system required economic actors to be passive, to accept deflation's pinch. In an era of rising democratic accountability and social consciousness, this was becoming less politically viable. Furthermore, the financial center of gravity was subtly shifting from London to New York, but without a formal central bank, the U.S. system was relying on ad hoc alliances of private bankers like J.P. Morgan to act as lender of last resort, a fragility that would be exposed spectacularly in the panic of 1907. Let's perform a thought experiment. If you could take a time machine back to 1905 with a single modern 1-ounce gold coin, like an American Eagle, what would happen? You'd likely be detained for suspicion of counterfeiting, as the design would be utterly alien. But assuming you could convince someone of its purity, its monetary value would be exactly $20.67. Its purchasing power, however, would be astronomical in terms of everyday goods, representing over a week's wages. But you couldn't easily spend it as currency. You'd need to sell it to a jeweler, banker, or perhaps a mining assayer, who would weigh it and, based on a fixed price, give you its value in contemporary gold coins or paper money. The modern coin would be bullion, not currency, highlighting the distinction between gold as money, 1905, and gold as a commodity, today. The year 1905 stands as a high watermark. Just 9 years later, the cataclysm of World War I would force nations to suspend gold convertibility to print money for the war effort. The genie of fiat currency would be let out of the bottle, never to be fully forced back in. The U.S. maintained a $20.67 price, but restricted exports. After a failed attempt to return to the full classical standard in the 1920s, the Great Depression would lead President Franklin D. Roosevelt to take the fateful step in 1933. He made private gold ownership illegal for Americans and, in 1934, revalued gold to $35 an ounce, a 69% devaluation of the dollar. The $20.67 era was officially dead, a casualty to the need for monetary flexibility to address national crisis. From our modern perspective, the $20.67 gold price seems like a quaint relic. Today, gold trades freely. It's price set by a 24-hour global market of speculators, investors, central banks, and jewelers reacting to inflation data, geopolitical fear, and dollar strength. It recently soared past $2,000 per ounce. To compare, we must adjust for inflation. Using the Consumer Price Index, $20.67 in 1905 is equivalent to about $700 to $725 today. Yet the market price is roughly triple that. This gap tells a profound story. It represents over a century of cumulative inflation beyond the official CPI, massive global debt expansion, the loss of monetary discipline, and gold's transformation from the definition of money to a hedge against the devaluation of money. The philosophical implications are deep. The 1905 system was rooted in objectivity. Value was external to the state, residing in a physical element with inherent scarcity. Our current system is based on subjectivity and trust. Fiat currency has value because the government says it does, and we all agree to believe it. The former offered stability but was rigid and cruel in adjustment. The latter offers flexibility and tools for managing economies, but invites debasement, asset bubbles, and a potential crisis of confidence. The $20.67 world asks citizens to trust in a tangible, impersonal standard. Our world asks us to trust in the wisdom and restraint of fallible institutions. For investors today, understanding this history is crucial. Gold's role has completely inverted. In 1905, it was the risk-free asset, the benchmark. Today, it is the hedge, the insurance policy against the failure of the system built to replace it. When investors buy gold now, they are effectively making a bet against the continued credibility of central banks and the longevity of fiat currency. They are buying a piece of that 1905 certainty, but at a price that reflects 120 years of accumulated skepticism. The journey from a fixed $20.67 to a volatile $2,000 plus is a chart not just of commodity, but the world's declining faith in immutable monetary rules. Could we ever return to such a standard? Most economists argue it is implausible. The global economy is too complex, and the need for active monetary policy to smooth cycles is too entrenched. A gold standard would handcuff governments from responding to crises like 2008 or 2020 with massive liquidity injections. It would also subject the world's money supply to the accidents of geology and mining technology. However, advocates, often from the Austrian School of Economics, argue that the discipline is precisely what we need to curb reckless deficit spending and boom-bust cycles fueled by easy money. They see the $20.67 era not as a straitjacket, but as a testament to responsible stewardship. The legacy of the $20.67 gold standard endures in subtle ways. The term sterling still signifies quality. Central banks, including the Federal Reserve, still hold thousands of tons of gold in their vaults, a vestigial nod to its foundational monetary role. The gold window at the New York Fed, where foreign governments could once exchange dollar for gold, is a tourist curiosity. More deeply, the allure of hard money persists in digital forms, with cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin explicitly designed to mimic gold scarcity and independence from state control, aiming to be a digital gold standard for the 21st century, attempting to recapture that lost objectivity. In the end, the simple answer, $20.67, unlocks a universe of understanding about economics, history, and human psychology. It was more than a price. It was a covenant of rule, a physical law of finance. It represented a world that prioritized long-term stability over short-term relief, international equilibrium over domestic management, and the discipline of nature over the discretion of man. Its rigidity was both its greatest strength and its fatal flaw. To study it is to see our own financial world in stark relief, to understand that our constant anxiety about inflation, debt, and currency wars is a direct consequence of trading that rigid anchor for the flexible but perilous tool of fiat money. So, the next time you see a flashing quote for the spot price of gold, remember its ghostly predecessor, the immutable $20.67. It's a number that whispers of a different America, a nation of gold coins in vest pockets, of transatlantic steamships carrying gold bars to settle accounts, of financial faith rooted in the earth itself. Share this story because in an age of meme stocks and algorithmic trading, it's a vital reminder that money itself has a history, and its nature determines the fate of nations. The true price of gold in 1905 wasn't $20.67. It was the entire economic order. That world is gone, shattered by war and depression, but its echo asks us a perpetual question. What, in the end, do we truly want our money to be? a promise written on paper, or a weight measured in metal? The answer evolves, but the question is eternal. Pass this on to the history buff, the finance geek, the crypto enthusiast. Let them know the anchor once existed.